Hey everyone, welcome to History Forge. My name is Taylor Hamlin, and today I'll be discussing how to teach students to create an online note-taking system and how to help them connect their project topics with a big historical theme. Now, before I get into this week, what I would like to do is talk about last week, namely the interventions I did. Now, I did two main interventions. One, I told the students you need to come up with something more narrow of a topic. And I thought the main reason why some students weren't narrowing their topics was because they were not uninterested now. They had, in the beginning, they had some kind of motivation, and maybe they just wanted to get it over with. And so I had several students who I believe just picked a topic in order to get the assignment done. Problem with that is a year-long assignment, you're going to lose motivation really quickly over something you really don't want to do. And so I gave the students the opportunity to choose something different. And the intervention itself was really focusing on what could you do? How could you make this better? Are you bored? Do you want to change? And I encourage the students not necessarily to change their topic, but mostly just to find something about it that they like, find a way that it could actually connect with people. And so I asked them questions like, what ways can your topic help our community? And what ways do you think your topic is important? And you can't just say, well, it's history, it's important. And I still got a lot of those answers. So I wrote down names of students who weren't able to give me that idea, that something, that oomph, that light bulb moment of, I think my topic's amazing because blank. I still had several students say, well, it's interesting, we should know our history. And that's not a bad answer, and it's true, but at the same time, they have to convince people that their topic matters. And so I want something deeper than that. Something deeper than just it's interesting. And so I would say I probably still have 15 students who are still needing that extra push, but I also probably brought in 15 students who now seem to have a better understanding of why this matters, how this can actually help people. I even had a group of girls who actually want to change their topic now. They chose something that I don't think they really cared for in the beginning. They just chose something in order to get it over with. And now the entire team wants to change their topic, and they've picked something I think really connects with them or something they think is important. And so I'm really excited to see what's going to happen next. Now, the other intervention that we did was connecting the big theme this year, the conflict and compromise theme, with the projects. Since some students are still having a hard time narrowing their topic down, I thought revisiting the big conflict and compromise theme would help them shrink down that topic again. And so we revisited it with a smaller group of people, and we refocused on those questions. I made students write down questions that reflect conflict and compromise and put it in their portfolio. So now we have students who actually seem to have a better understanding of what their topic can actually do for this year's theme. And it's all about making those bigger connections, whittling down their topics, and then going into this week with a better understanding of what we could actually turn this into. So those were the really good things last week, and of course we always have some weaknesses or things that didn't go very well. For example, I realized I started the annotated bibliographies way too early. Annotated bibliographies started a couple weeks ago, and now I realize that when you're first surveying sources, you don't really need to write annotations. Annotations are kind of boring, and they're not really helpful either in the very beginning. All you're really doing is finding general websites like Wikipedia, other like physical encyclopedias, .com sites, general things in order to gain information about your topic. That's it. You're looking for names and dates and a few other factors, but really all you're doing is trying to collect information in order to find more secondary sources and later primary sources. That's when we should start doing annotated bibliographies. And so I regret that we started them so early because I think it was a complicated task that even though students did them and they did them well, we could have pushed it off a while, and that time could have instead been used for connecting the topics with their interests, finding out more about the students, reaching out to them more, doing it more interventions, things like that. And so next year I definitely will fix that, but since we've already started the annotated bibliographies this year, we're just going to continue on that pace. And one more thing with the annotated bibliographies, students have now created annotations for websites that they are not allowed to use anymore. For example, I have a lot of students who've used Wikipedia pages because I told them they could in order to find basic information. But now the students can't use those in those annotated bibs because a bibliography that's actually used to back up your research cannot have a Wikipedia site or any website that does not have at least an organization backing it up or a well-known author that has the credentials to back up what they're saying. Now students are going to have to go back and actually delete all annotations that they completed, and so I think they're going to feel a little let down that they put in work into something and now it's going to be destroyed. So all these reasons together, I'm going to take annotated bibliographies, we're going to push them back farther, in the future, but since we've already got them started, we're just going to continue to work with them. Another thing I've realized too is some students need to be completely moved to paper. That is, they need to have all their sources printed out, and I need to have those students underline, circle, highlight, and take notes on those actual documents. This is just some students aren't able to handle the liberty of a computer. They get distracted too easily. They play games sometimes. They go on YouTube too much, and I let my students listen to music. I let them have some freedom of the room. Problem is, when I'm doing interventions and I'm moving around, students who already have a hard time with the computer will completely take that freedom and abuse it. And so I had some students that I had to pull computers away from, give them paper instead, and say, hey, this is what you're going to have to do now. You're going to have to underline, highlight, take all your notes on the piece of paper instead of doing it online, which is a lot easier. But now, since they have to do it this way, I can at least make sure that they're taking notes. I had one student who was about 2 weeks behind who is now completely caught up with 10 actual sources that are all good sources, and he has notes for each one. He just couldn't handle the computer. And so this way, we're actually getting more work done for that student, and I can encourage him to say, like, hey, look at all this great work you did. Now can you just use the computer? Respect this technology. And so giving them a chance again is important, but always being mindful that sometimes you're just going to have to pull that stuff away and let the students work on paper only. Now, one more thing I did this last week was an intervention for some students who already had really good topics in research. Was I introduced them to the note-taking online system that I'm going to actually show everyone else today. And I'm glad I did it this way because now I have about 5 to 6 or sometimes more students each class who know what we're doing this week, and I can use them now to help me show the other students. And so I'll do the initial explanations for all students, and then I'm going to have the ones who already know the system help out everybody else. And so it's like having a bunch of student teachers with me who can actually take my methods and in small groups make sure everyone's doing it the right way. But even with that group, I had a hard time explaining the system to them, and it's just because it's a complicated topic. A lot of students don't understand what it means to actually create an online note-taking system, and I was speeding through it too quickly. The only reason I found that out was because the students confided into another teacher saying, we don't really get this, and she approached me saying, you need to slow down for them. And so I had to completely take some steps back and say, guys, I know it seems complicated, but let me know how I can break it up. And I did. I took it into smaller pieces, and I believe students did it pretty well. And so this week I'm going to check those students who already did it, and I'm going to really encourage them to help out others. Now, one last thing that went really well last week was giving some students the complete freedom to work on their actual research. I had several students who were very far ahead, so they had a lot of research already done, or they had really great narrow topics. And I said, guys, you're going to have a day and a half to actually work on your assignment. Find sources, take notes on them. I'm giving you complete liberty right now. And they went to the library, or they went into our commons area where they were either supervised or half supervised, and they got a lot of work done. So I'm really positive about this. That shows that we can give many of our students some liberty and say, hey, you did a great job. Here's a little more freedom. You don't need to be confined to the classroom all the time. You can take a step out into kind of the different world. And to me, that really prepares them for higher education where they are encouraged to be very independent. And so it's a small step for them. They don't need to be in the classroom all the time. They're still being supervised, or they're still having adults around them, but to let them actually do their own research after they've been explained to and give them time to do so and reward them for their excellent work, what an excellent way to actually show students that we're building trust with them and we are encouraging them to work hard. So that was my last thing I did last week that I really thought was great, and I'm looking forward to implementing that strategy again during future weeks. All right, so now I'm going to go over the outline for this coming week. On Monday, we'll start with the history lecture like we normally do. It's going to focus over a primary source, and then we're going to move our attention over to creating a note-taking system and evaluating secondary sources. I do have documents for that I will attach in the links below. And it's all going to be about showing students how they can actually organize all their notes for all the secondary sources and eventually primary sources they'll be taking in a way that they'll easily be able to find information in the future. Also, Monday through Friday, there'll be Google Classroom questions for all sections of my U.S. History group. And then moving into Tuesday, we're going to actually talk more about the National History Day theme, conflict and compromise, and connecting it with their historical topics. Primary source discussions will happen with certain groups, and some other groups are going to actually have to do deeper primary source observations in order to show me that they can actually do that. On Wednesday, we'll do a primary source analysis intervention where students actually have to show me that they can make observations and other students will have more time to get research done. Thursday and Friday, I'm going to go to a historical conference in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and will not be able to be here. So my students will be working mostly with reviewing each other's work, turning in certain PBL assignments, and finishing up a lot of their actual guided reading. The entire week will then mostly focus on creating this online system of note-taking and actually start taking notes whenever they have free time. So the moment students get done with their daily work in class or finish up with the lecture, they'll immediately move into finding secondary sources and taking notes on them. Now, as you saw in the outline, it's going to be really heavy on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday just because I'm going to a conference on Thursday and Friday. So I'm going to be putting a lot more of the lectures and checks on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday just to get them out of the way. And then I'm going to encourage students on Thursday and Friday to do their peer editing, their daily questions, and also a few other assignments that revolve around the research. But basically, Thursday and Friday, the students are going to have 2 days to be independent. And so I want to make sure that they actually understand that there is plenty of work they could be doing and letting the sub know that they have plenty of work they could be doing. Now on Monday, I'm going to be showing the note-taking system. And the note-taking system is just using Google Drive and allowing the students to create one document for every single source that they find and putting it into Google. I teach the students how to actually write down citation information in the beginning and also how to look for key things. And it's all guided in the boxes. And I'll put links down to that in the below box. That way you guys can see what I'm talking about. But basically the document has all these boxes with questions that go over validating a secondary source, proving to me that this secondary source is something valuable and is well backed up. So it has somebody writing it that is either a PhD or is in academia or belongs to an organization. Now what's really important is to tell students that these notes are going to be deep. Our beginning notes were pretty shallow. We're just looking for names and dates and things like that. Now we're going to start taking notes and we're going to start asking questions about them. Specifically how and why questions. Why did the author write it this way? How come they did it this way? How did the author write it this way? What evidence did he use? Things like this. We want them to ask deeper questions and write the actual questions down because eventually one of these questions or more could become their possible big research question for their entire project. So I really want to press home the idea that these notes are important. Because many students think note-taking is just copying and pasting down what they see. And that's a flaw of our system. We have taught students that copying and pasting from a whiteboard or smartboard or filling in the blanks is what note-taking is, and that's rubbish. The entire idea of note-taking should be writing down information that's important, but also asking questions about it. That's what real note-taking is, and we need to press that home with students. So I designed the document to do that, validating the secondary source and finding relevant information that actually helps them with their research. And as I said before, many of the students have already done this. I have at least 5 per class who have already gone through this system, and I'm going to use them as student teachers in a way to help me make sure everyone else gets it, because the students who did already take this were the ones who had good topics, good research. So overall, they're pretty on the ball, and they were having a hard time understanding the concept. So I'm glad I taught them early, because now I'm going to strategically place them in my classroom surrounded by a certain group and have them help me out, show each other what it looks like. And I'm going to actually encourage students who are part of the same group to share the same folders with each other. All this stuff is possible in Google Drive, and if anyone ever has any questions about it, just send me comments below and I can explain it better, or feel free to email me or message me on any of the social media. Now on Tuesday, we're going to expand on the intervention I gave last week where I talked about connecting this year's conflict and compromise theme with the actual topics. We haven't looked at the theme for almost 4 weeks now, and so I want to revisit the actual theme and say, all right guys, we need to come up with questions that relate to the theme somehow. We need to start kind of putting your topics through this microscope of whatever the theme or question you're going to choose. And so many students have already done this. This is what one of my interventions was. And I'm glad I did it this way. I actually pulled certain students out of each group, making sure that the classroom at least had one person per group who did the intervention with the theme last week. And so just like my other intervention where the students are going to come in and help everyone do the note-taking system, these students already have the stuff written down for their topics and their groups. And so hopefully that'll get the juices flowing a little bit quicker and people will feel like they have a little bit of a foundation that they can stand on. Because connecting big themes to their topics is extremely difficult. It's all abstract. And so we need to be careful and go about this very wisely. And I think starting off with a intervention with 1 or 2 students per group was a very intelligent idea on my part. On Wednesday, we're going to finally wrap it up with a primary source intervention. I'm going to be doing primary source analysis sheets next week, and we've already been doing primary sources in class. The students know what they are, or at least they pretend to be, and we've already gone through them each week on Monday with our lectures, and some of the other students have been getting them on their Google Classrooms. And so if they don't quite understand what the definition is, they at least know what it is for the most part. They see what it's like. And I've been collecting data on these primary sources, trying to figure out which students are having a hard time just making basic observations, looking at a source and saying, oh, it says this, or it means this, things like that. Simple observations. So I'm going to pull those students aside and say, okay, guys, we're going to just practice how to make an observation of a thing. And I'm not really sure what I'm going to pick yet. I think I'm going to start with a picture just because pictures are a little bit easier to make observations of because you're just staring at it and you can pull a lot of things from it. And most students won't shy away from it. If it's reading, a lot of students will kind of like, I don't really want to read, especially older sources. So I will start with a photo most likely and then just have the students pick it apart. And the entire goal is to make observations, not to connect them to history, not to actually come up with some kind of analysis and some kind of like theory about it. Just simple, make observations, as many as you possibly can. That way the students are at least understanding like, oh, this is what note-taking is like. All I'm doing is writing what I see, and then later we'll kind of ease into the idea of, okay, now you basically have, this big list. How are you going to take this huge list and connect it with what you know about history or questions at least that you can ask? And that's it pretty much for the entire week. And Thursday and Friday, we're just going to focus on letting the students do peer evaluations. The peer evaluations have been going extremely well. My students enjoy giving feedback to each other, and the appraisal and criticism part, they're getting better at. In fact, I think because I started it so early this year, I'm already seeing a lot more growth than I did in years past. I'm enjoying watching them help each other out, but also actually watching them kind of figure out, okay, what does a good criticism look like? And I'm coaching that as I go, and I eventually will probably do interventions. Just right now we're so wrapped up with just getting these projects started that I think interventions for critique and analysis will probably come more in the second semester, because that's when they're going to actually take their own big projects and critique them against other people, and I'm going to actually send students away to other projects and say, okay, you need to critique this thing based off, your historical knowledge. So I think that's going to be more of an intervention we do in the future, but it is going well so far, and I'm excited to see what the students do when I'm not here. All right, so that is it for our weekly calendar. Now I would like to show you this week's online resource.
This week's online resource is called Voices of History. This website is sponsored by the Bill of Rights Institute and mostly has several lesson plans that are backed up with primary sources. Many of the ideas now in social studies are to teach with primary sources. However, that becomes very complicated when you have to find the source, come up with questions, and come up with assessments. Voices of History will do all that for you, and it has several different kinds with keywords as well. So if you keep scrolling through, you'll see where you could actually search for things, and it'll come up with different lesson plans about a certain topic. So for example, if you wanted to talk about immigration or incorporation into American society, it'll find sources for you that will do that. So definitely check them out. Use these lesson plans because most of them are really well created and give you plenty of resources to come up with a great lesson.
That takes care of the online resource and the weekly calendar. I hope you gained some information from both. Last week I actually updated my own website, historyforge.org, and I put in a lot more teaching with primary sources lessons. And now I have a really good idea of where the gaps are. For example, we don't have many lesson plans on religion and several other topics. So I'm going to be spending a lot of my time each weekend creating 1 or 2 lessons based off primary sources, using the same kind of questions I've already uploaded into historyforge.org, and actually creating more lessons to help people find more ways to teach history, because right now there are some significant gaps. Like I said, religion's one of them, gender identity would be another, economy, technology. There's several topics more too, and I want to find primary sources using like the Library of Congress and other websites I use, and actually creating lessons out of them and sharing them. That way everyone has more of an opportunity to be presenting history in a unique way in their classes. Another great way to be using these sources is to share them with groups who already have a specific source. So for example, I have some great Salem witch trial resources on historyforge.org, and I don't plan on teaching that in class, but I have 2 different groups who are doing Salem witch trials. I'm going to share those resources with them. I'm going to give them those resources and actually have them analyze them. count that for class. Show them what it looks like to actually analyze a source that is relevant to their topic, because that's just going to create more interest and more intrigue with what they're doing. I enjoy hearing about the ways people use these sources, so again, if you are using them, I really would like to know. That wraps up History Forge for this week. Thanks again for stopping by. Please check out our social media. Give us a like, give us a comment, and give us any feedback. I really do appreciate hearing the ideas of other people. Some historians, some teachers have contacted me with ideas, with support, and it really is nice to hear that people are listening. And so if you would like to know more information, you would like to have a personal conversation, feel free to send me a message, or if you want to start something more public, feel free to make a comment on this video below. Again, thanks again for stopping by. Hope to see you next week. Take care. That is it. Ooh la la. All the different accents I can use. I probably should be using a Spanish accent. That's actually what I teach.